Community Hub.
Yeah. I
Did you
click
start
new,
recording, Christian?
create new project
Yeah, it should be
3D, and
recording already.
Okay. I don't know how to do co-hosts. The thing
It's all
just says
good.
I can make you host,
It's all
but
good.
I gave you yeah.
I think it'll be fine. I'll just keep
I'm gonna
chat
try it with
open.
a new.
What's up, y'all? Yeah, had a lot of people just join in. Let's go. Hi, Athena.
I should just disable them.
Yo,
My-
Emily looks like she's.
Let me in,
No,
says
no.
Joyce.
My Unity file is not. It keeps failing to create a new Unity file. That's why I look like this. Trying to make it. I'm trying to get it to
What's going
work.
Can you
on, guys?
disable the waiting room, Jarrett? And
Oh, dude, I'm really bad at this. I don't know.
it's all good. It's all good.
Make us co-host.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that
I
either.
don't.
There's an
Athena, do
option
you
that
know how
lets
to
me
do
make
co-host?
someone host, but not.
Right
like-
click and then it should say like make host.
I see make host, not make co-host.
Okay.
That's
So
I-
strange.
There should be a make co-host as well. Also, you guys have 3 people here, so I might pop over to the other one.
Yeah,
And
possibly.
like I'll follow through on that one, but then
Mhm.
like I'll stay in the tutorial area for
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. Hello, Joyce.
Also,
why
I'm
are
gonna
you
follow
Joyce
in
the
the-
only one here? What are you
Alright, I
guys
disabled
doing?
Let's go,
waiting
Joyce.
room.
Come
You
on,
can
come
join
on.
now.
I just redid all my wires, and my
Oh, that's
camera
why,
has
I
to be
see.
all the way to the fucking right of my monitor, and I can't pull it any further, so that's why I'm off center
see.
as hell.
Oh, so only the people with their videos on shows up. I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
It
trying
like
to join
pushes them to
multiple
the top.
things at once.
I need to get something like
We'll
that.
start in a few minutes, but for those who joined, if you haven't downloaded the asset package you put on Discord,
Yeah.
download that really quick. And then if you want, you can open up a new 3D Unity project as well.
Yeah. What should we title it, Jarrett? What do you think?
The game?
The project, yeah.
Oh yes, mine is titled Beginner Tutorial 2020.
Beginner Tutorial 2020. I'm gonna follow in your footsteps.
Okay.
Bruh. How the fuck do I join multiple ones at once? Holy
It's
fuck.
really annoying.
How do I do that? I actually
I think you have to do it with another device.
I think
Seriously,
I
this can
joined
take
with
a shit.
multiple things.
No, you can join with multiple.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's just really
but I don't know
dumb.
how to enable this shit. Oh, hold on.
Excuse me, Unity, why are you using why are you using the wrong version? God, I hate versions. Okay.
You can just do 3D. You don't need to
3D
do
should
3D
be
with
fine.
extras. Yeah.
Jared, apparently you go to participants, more, make co-host. Can you try that?
Like on the person's name, I can press more, but like the option is only make host. Like, do you want me to make you host and see what happens? I'm
Huh.
pretty sure that's just gonna make you the host of the entire meeting, right?
All right. Yeah.
I mean,
you could just go
it's
without
not
it then.
bad.
It's all good.
Yeah, I can switch hosts from me to you. I think that's it. I must have disabled something when I made the meeting.
Oh, okay.
I don't
It's
know.
all good.
We can look at it for next time.
Yeah. It's all good. All right. Yeah. If you're not booting up Unity already, you probably should, just in case it takes like a little bit.
Yeah. I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Let's just share projects. Can everyone see my screen on Unity right now?
Yes, sir.
This is weird. The recommended version of Unity we're using right now is 2019.4 point something.
2019. It's 2019.4.12 F1.
Okay.
Yeah.
3D project.
All right, I can't really see chat from here, so like,
Yeah,
can you guys? Okay,
I'll,
cool.
I'll make sure to check in with it. Also, if you're asking a question that you'd like us to respond to pretty fast, just try to precede it with at question, just so we can see it easier. At question, why is Jarrett so cool? As an example, and then Jarrett, tell us why you're so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna hop over to the other one.
Yeah, for sure.
But if like any of you guys have any help and like they're still going through stuff, you can also.
Well, they need help.
No, I know. I'm saying like if the people in this tutorial right now like need help, you guys can like ping in the like questions channel
Mhm.
in the Discord, and I can, or like other officers will also be there to help you as well.
All right. Since it's 6:07, I guess we'll start talking. So for those of you if this is your first time coming to a studio meeting, my name's Jarrett Ishii. I'm an officer, and me and Christian will be leading the beginner tutorials this year. So we'll be
Hello.
alternating. Christian,
Yeah.
say hello.
Hi, I'm Christian. I'm currently a third year, and I'll be helping teach the beginning tutorials. But Jared's gonna take the lead with this one. Also, just to preface, if you guys like are going through this or like are following along with the tutorial, but like we're going over things that you probably that you already know and you've worked with, then you can probably, for like at least for today, hop over to the advanced tutorial and see if you can follow along with that one instead. But like the later we go on in the quarter, the more tutorials we have, we'll get to like teach you guys different things. So definitely come back for next week's tutorial.
Yeah, definitely. So for sure, this week tutorial, we're focused at the target audience, people who've never seen Unity before. So this may be
Mhm.
slow if you've ever used Uni before, just bear with us. So I guess to start off, I can show you the project we are going to be making today. We're going to make like a little maze that you can go through, and you have different levels you drop down. But let me maximize and play. So if you see, this is what the actual game will kind of look like. You play as this marble, you go through the maze, and then you drop down into the next level, and you can keep going like that. This is kind of our end project for, by the end of this meeting, you should have something resembling this. How do I get out of the way zoom? Okay, so now for those of you who just opened a project, your screen should look something like this. And my layout tab is going to be different. So let me switch over to, oh shoot, let me restart sharing. It just switched when I switched the layout. Okay, can everyone see my screen again?
Yes.
If this is your first time ever opening Unity, your screen should look something like this. You should have like this scene in this tab in the middle called the scene tab, or possibly the game tab underneath it. On the left, you should have this tab called the hierarchy. You should have this project down here on the bottom, which right now should just have, I don't think it should have really anything in it, actually. It should be empty. But and then on the right, you should have what's called an inspector. So these are kind of like, in Unity, there are kind of 5 main tabs that you'll spend most of your time working in. And we'll go over each of those right now. Well, through this tutorial, those are basically the 5. So the hierarchy, the scene, the game, the inspector, and the project. And what you can actually do is drag them around and move them around. So like if I don't really want the game tab to be underneath, I can move it around and bring it down here or something. But so you can play around that. It's the layout of these tabs is really personal preference, and you'll kind of figure that out as you learn more about what each of them do. One thing to know is this top right drop down. Can everyone see my mouse? Okay, I'll actually as well.
Yeah, we can see it.
There's this tab over here that will list certain options on ways you can split your screen. So default, oh, let me change the way I'm sharing my screen. because whenever I switch it, it's closing out. Let me just share this actual screen. Okay, this should work now, fine. So I can go default, I can switch to like this force split interface. You can do whatever this is called, tall interface, or this is the one that I normally use, but I'll use the default one for now so that people who've never used Uni before can kind of have a better idea of where I'm looking at. All right, so the main tab you want to look at
Jared, you're cutting out right now.
We're losing you, Jared.
Yeah,
now
we're
is the
losing you.
scene tab. So
Jared,
if
can you repeat that from the
want to
beginning?
look
Sorry.
Yep, you cut out the whole way.
on this,
Oh my gosh. We lost him, voice.
Oh no.
Let me try to bring up his notes.
if something Christian can take.
Jared, can you post in your notes that you want me to go over? Sorry guys, we have technical difficulties.
Jared has bad internet. He always has bad internet. I guess Christian, do you want to take over?
Yeah, I'm just asking Jared what he wants me to talk about first.
Oh,
You
he
can
left
also
the
turn
call.
your cam off if you want.
Can everyone
Jared.
hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Oh,
Yeah,
Jared,
yeah.
you're back.
I'm just gonna go through without my cam.
For sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all good.
should work better, yeah. Sometimes that happens. So
Yeah.
All right, so let me start sharing screen again. Okay, so are we good now? Everyone can see?
We're good.
We're back online.
Mhm.
All right, so I think I left off talking about the scene tab, correct?
Yeah.
By the way, if that ever happens again, feel free to like let me know, because I won't know I've cut out until like you guys tell me, and one of the other officers might be able to jump in and answer questions during that time. But
For sure.
so the scene tab is this tab in the middle. It's where you kind of construct your actual game. So right now you should only see kind of this camera icon and a light icon. And these are the only two objects that you currently have in your scene. But as you add more objects, like a player object or enemies or a level, you'll all make your modifications generally in here, the scene view. So if you want to now, in order to navigate the scene view, what you can do is if you hold right click it while inside the scene view and you move your mouse, that will allow you to rotate. And you can rotate around from like the point from wherever you were looking from currently. You can also use while holding the right click, you can use WASD to maneuver around. And this will let you kind of like free roam around what you're looking at. The E key lets you go up and the Q key lets you go down. So if you ever got like below an object, you could come up to it or down to it. And you won't really need this now, but if you do start working with larger scenes, holding shift will speed you up. So you can go ahead and try that on your own right now. Just try and get comfortable with how to navigate the scene view because you'll be doing this a lot. One other thing to note is the Alt key. So right click again rotates like this, but if you hold Alt and click around, you'll kind of rotate around like that center point. So for example, if we had an object in the scene, like I want to look at the other side of the camera, I can use Alt and then rotate around the camera like that. Like holding right click only rotates around myself, but Alt will let me rotate around a specific object. So I can get better view of what is in front of me. Okay, so now the game view is what your player sees. So this scene view is only the what is available to like the developer. Your player is going to see whatever this camera sees. So if we select game view, we can see here, this is the game, what the player will see if we were to start the game. And you can actually see it from the scene view. When you select the camera down here in this corner in the camera preview, this should show you what the game is. Because we currently have nothing there, there's not going to be anything to see. So we can change that and add something so you can start building out a level. So what we're going to do is go over here to the hierarchy tab on the left side of your screen if you're on the default setup. The hierarchy tab can kind of be thought of as a list of everything that's currently in your game. So like right now, all we have is the camera and the directional light. You can click on them to select them, just the same way you can click on them in the scene view to select them. But we want to add something right now. So there's a few ways to add something, but we can show you all of them. They're pretty simple. So for stars, you can right click in the hierarchy and you should get this drop down menu. And if you come down to 3D object, there should be a list of objects and we're going to add a cube. So by clicking cube, we now have a cube somewhere in our scene and that will appear just kind of randomly in space. And we can also have it here in the hierarchy. So now like if you look at the game view, we still can't see it. And that's because if we shift our scene view, look around, it's actually behind the camera. The camera is pointing here and our cube's down here. So a lot of times when you spawn things into Unity, they kind of get created in really random locations. So that will bring us kind of over into our next tab, which is called the inspector. The inspector should, if you're on default, will be on the right side of the screen. And it will show here. Basically, it lists all the properties and attributes of your game object. So you can think of a game object not really as like a physical object, but more of a container that contains attributes. And those attributes are what make something something. So for example, this cube wouldn't really be a cube if it didn't have this cube mesh filter and a mesh render. This tells Unity that this is a cube and then it looks like a cube. Without these, it wouldn't show up anything. Like I can turn it off and now like the cube's gone. I can turn it back on again and it will reappear. The one thing to note, so different game objects can all have different kinds of attributes. So for example, if I select the camera, you'll notice the camera has this camera attribute, which basically just tells the game it's a camera, and also an audio listener, which is for adding audio into your game. And same thing with the directional light. It has a light attribute with all these different kinds of settings that you can change to define what kind of light you want in your game. The one commonality between all game objects is this one here called the transform. The transform is like, well, as it says, it defines every game object has to have a position in three-dimensional space. So a transform has a position on an XYZ coordinate plane. It also needs to face a direction. So that's what your rotation is. So for example, my camera right now is facing the direction 0, 0, 0. So that's direction is 0, 0, 0. And then a scale just defines the size. So like right now, when I created my cube, it got created at this position of some random like 3.4, negative 2.9, negative 12 point something. That's not really a good spot. We don't really want that. So a good habit to get into when you're creating objects is to reset these down to 0. And there's a few ways you can do that. You can manually type it in by clicking it and just typing 0, 0, 0, and then it goes back to the origin. Or if you notice, there's these 3 dots at the top right of where the transform is selected. And we can click on those and hit reset, and it would reset it to 0, 0, 0. So for example, like if I typed like 25 in here, now it shoots off to the right. But I can select these dots, hit reset, and it gets dropped back to the origin. Okay. So now
Any
there are
questions so
multiple
far,
ways.
by the way?
Yeah, any questions? Sorry.
Yeah, feel free to type in the chat as the camera I'll be looking. But otherwise, we can keep going.
Yeah, if I'm going on for a while, feel free to like shout, turn on your mic and shout something out as well. And Christian, you guys can remind me to stop as well for questions. Great, thanks.
Okay, we're good.
So now that we have this cube, we want to kind of like alter it or change it to fit. Like a cube is nice and all, but it's not always the most exciting thing. So there are these if you look at the top left, you'll notice there's a few buttons here. One's called the hand tool. There's the move tool, the rotate tool, the scale tool. This tool you won't have to worry about. And then this tool, which again is kind of like the 3 of them combined. So these allow you to move around and alter your objects from within the scene. So for example, with the move tool selected, or I can select the hand tool, and the hand tool lets me drag around. So one thing to recommend, if this is your first time using Unity, it's recommended to use a mouse, just because it's a lot easier to use to navigate. But if you, for some reason, you didn't have a mouse, use the hand tool to navigate around the scene. It does the same things as like the keys we were talking about before. So you can hold left click on the hand tool to drag around, right click to rotate. So the move tool appears with these arrows, and these arrows represent its position in space. So if you notice, when we move it along these arrows, I can grab on one of them and it will change my X position. So if you notice the transform, my X position is changing. I can drag it off way into the distance or way off screen. I can move that. I can move this as well. Just something to mention, if you zoom in on it, you noticed how there's not just arrows, there's also these planes. So you can actually move things along a plane, instead. So like this is the YZ plane, I can move it along that. But in most scenarios, you don't actually want to do that. It's a lot better just to use the arrows or to type whatever number you want in. So like I can reset it back to 0, 0, 0 and reposition it that way. The next tool is the rotate tool. So I can go up to the top left again and select the rotate tool. In doing so, we'll create, instead of arrows, we have this kind of sphere around it with each of these represents a different axis, and I can click and drag to rotate along that axis. If you notice this, again, this is going to change my transform values. So I can do that manually as well. Like I can just set it to 5 and it will change. I can set it to 0, well, that's 50. Set it to 0 and it's back to normal. And then the next tool is oh, I think I forgot to mention this, but your scroll wheel can help you zoom in and out as well in the scene view. The next tool is the scale tool. So selecting the scale tool creates similar to the move tool with the position, but this creates boxes, and clicking on one of these boxes will stretch it along that axis. So one thing to note is when I select like the red cube here, it doesn't only pull along the way I'm moving my mouse. So as I move my mouse to the left, the stretch tool won't just pull it to the left, it'll stretch it in both directions along that axis. So it's something to keep in mind when you're scaling. And similarly to the position tool, you have this box in the middle. Oh, well, similarly but different. So this box, instead of doing it along like one axis, it uniformly scales it. So I can pull it out wide, pull it smaller. Well, let's just pull it back to 1, 1, 1. Now it's back to a cube. So I just pulled up chat really quick, and it's someone asked, is it not important that my box is brown and not white? So it's not important. That's just a lighting. That is just a lighting issue. I can talk about that towards the end of the tutorial. It happens. It means it's kind of a performance thing Unity automatically doesn't do. It doesn't like calculate or render all of your lighting in order to just make sure the performance stays up. So like if you're working on a large project, you wouldn't want to constantly be like auto-generating lighting. So it may just stay brown instead. Yeah, we can show you how to fix that towards the end. That's just this minor thing. That is true. It could be possible your light is colored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's not really too relevant to our project. We can show you later how to change it. But yeah, you're still following just fine.
So the one thing to know, we can go back to the game view now. We have this cube, but like we can hit this play. At the top of your screen, you'll see play and pause. So we can hit play and that will start the game. And you notice now the game has started and nothing's happening. And that's because all we have is kind of this static box floating in space. So we can look back in the hierarchy and we can look closer at these attributes we have, and we can add attributes that will kind of add more functionality to the game. So we explained the mesh cube, mesh filter, and mesh render kind of just give it its look, what makes it a cube. This box collider, it kind of defines the outer boundary of this game object for Unity. So like Unity doesn't know just by looking at this box where it stops and ends, it has a collider to tell it. So in order to add more functionality, we're going to add a component called a Rigidbody. So if you scroll down to the bottom of your inspector, there should be an add component button. You can select that. And if you type in RIGID, you should see Rigidbody and Rigidbody 2D. Just make sure you select Rigidbody because Rigidbody 2D is just made for 2D games and it would be weird in a 3D environment. So doing so should add this new component. And you should see like mass, drag, angular drag. So to kind of define what a rigid body is, you can think of it as a kind of an attribute that lets Unity know to apply physics to this object. So for example, Unity now, well, I guess I can press play, that'll be a good example. So now if you hit play with this added rigid body, you'll notice the square will kind of just fall into oblivion. It'll just keep going, it won't stop. And that's because it now has gravity applied to it. Unity has a built-in physics engine that it knows to apply gravity to this object, which is why you have like this button here that says use gravity. So like we could check it off to make it stop, or we can keep it on. That's kind of what a rigid body is. it applies physics. A lot of times you put that on players, which is actually what we're going to do in a little bit. But first, we should probably create something to catch that box so it doesn't just fall into oblivion. So if you go back to your hierarchy, we can right click, or I can show you one of the other ways to create a game object since we didn't before. In the hierarchy, you should notice this little plus button, and selecting this does the same thing as right clicking. So you notice the same drop down will appear with empty, empty child, 3D object, 2D object. We're going to go back to 3D object, create another cube. And now again, we notice that when we spawn the cube, it just creates it at a random location. So we can go ahead and reset that. We can reset it back to reset its position. And now it's back at 0, 0, 0. So it's inside the other box because we didn't actually move it. So remember, we have this move tool at the top left we can select, and now we have the arrows, or we could have typed in the values here in the position. But doing so, we can pull it up. Now, actually, we want to pull it down because this is going to be a floor. We have this box underneath our first box. We can select the game view, and we can see that this is what the player will see. So now, for example, if we press play, our first box will fall onto that second box. Let me pull it up so you can see it better. Because that second box we created doesn't have physics. So they both have colliders. So Unity will register there was a collision and stop them there together. That something's in the way of its force. Yeah, so just turning off play. Oops, I hit it again. Just to reiterate what we did. We
Also,
go down to add component. What is that, Christian?
Oh yeah, sorry. Just a quick note is something interesting during about Unity is during play mode, if you edit any values, upon exiting play mode, all the values get reset. So if you guys are in play mode and then you add a rigid body to an object and then you exit play mode, it will remove that rigid body component. So whenever you're working with your scene and you're trying to make something permanent, make sure to be out of play mode in case that's happening to anybody.
Thanks, Christian.
Mhm.
Okay, so now this cube is kind of right now, it's acting as like a floor for this other cube, but it's really small. So maybe we want to scale it out. So again, we can go up to the top left and click the scale tool. And now we can drag this out and create a wider floor. So now we have a larger floor for this cube to drop on. But still, this is still kind of a boring game, right? But now you can't actually do anything. So we're going to move on to creating a player object. So we're going to we don't actually need this first cube anymore. So you can go ahead and select it and just hit delete, and it should be gone from your hierarchy and scene. You should just be left with the second cube, your floor, which I can actually rename it the floor. Are there any questions right now? Since we're about to move the player, we can stop for questions real quick. Anyone want
to? Jay, can you just show how to pop out the game view? It's so that we can see the game and the scene at the same time.
Yeah. So we have scene, we have game. We can go drag the game view. We can place it really anywhere we want. Let's put it down here. So you see how it kind of snaps into this position. You can kind of to snap where you want. Just hold and click and drag the tab. And then you see this should appear, and now we can stretch it out. So we kind of have a bit more now we kind of have our scene view above our game view. So now we can look around in our scene, and our scene view should mirror our game view. All right, so now let's move on to the player. Unless there's more questions. Any other questions?
We look good to go.
Okay, cool. So you've all downloaded the Unity package, correct? We're going to need the scripts in there to create the player. We're not going to be writing scripts for this tutorial. We're just going to use the ones we provided. So that package contains the scripts we're going to need. If you don't know how to import it into a Unity project, we can show you. So assuming you've downloaded it from our Discord, and if not, let one of the officers know, we can resend the link or show you where the link is. But once you want it, you can go up here to assets, click import package and select custom package. And then this is where mine was stored. I already have them all down installed, but I can select it to show you no. So mine is going to tell me there's nothing to import because I have all the assets imported. Yours, if you selected the package, should list these scripts that were in the package and then ask you to import. So just make sure you select them all and then import them. And they should appear somewhere down here in your projects tab, which I think is the last tab we haven't talked about yet. So the projects tab you can think of is, it's kind of like a link from your computer to this game. It's where all of your assets are stored. So like if you wanted to store art assets like sprites or 3D models or custom scripts you wrote, those would all end up in your project tab and you could view them here. So for example, yours should basically be empty initially, except for sample scene. It should only have a sample scene inside unless you created more scene or added another asset. But when you import that, there should be a scripts folder now, and it should have these 4 scripts inside. Is that clear to anyone? Does anyone have any questions about how to import these assets or about the projects tab, or is anyone having any issues? The materials are not supposed to be there. That's something we'll get to later. So my tab here, I have more assets than you guys do just because I built that prototype earlier. And we will get to that in a little bit. So right now you should just have sample scene and a scripts folder. Cool. Okay, so now in order to make the player. So let's go back to our hierarchy because we need some kind of object to kind of act as our player for this game. And we used a marble. We're going to be making a rollerball game. So we'll go down, we can right click and go to 3D object and select sphere. And that sphere again is going to be created somewhere random. So we can reset its position, and now it's back at 0, 0, 0. And now if we go down to add component on the inspector of the sphere, we can search up the assets that are inside our project tab, the scripts. They will appear here. So for example, we have a script there that's called player movement. So if you type player movement in, there should be a C# script called player movement that should show up. And you can click that, and that will be added into your inspector now on the object. Is everyone good with that?
Yeah, it seems like nobody has any questions just yet.
Affect how fast the ball moves. My internet connections just told me it's unstable, so let me know if I cut out.
Yeah, you cut out like once or twice, but I think we're good to keep going.
No questions? Everyone added the player movement script to their object. Okay. So there's the speed object. We can give it a number. I put it at 5 for that playthrough before. And if we hit play, and then you use the WASD. Oh, sorry, I forgot one thing. We need to add a rigid body to the sphere. So I just see, if you noticed, I just got like an error message at the bottom here that told me there's no rigid body attached to the sphere. So if you're ever making your own games and you're trying to hit play and there's a compiler error basically, these errors will show up down here. You can select it to see more information. So it's not happy that we didn't give our player a rigid body. So we'll select our sphere either in the scene or in the hierarchy, and we can select add component, and we can search up rigid body and select that. And now it should work. Yeah, we hit, and now we can move it around. If you notice in our game view that the sphere is kind of moving as I use WASD, but this still is not a very good game because our camera is so far away and it's hard to see what we're doing, right? It's easy to fall off the edge. So we can hit play. Also, this is something Christian mentioned earlier, but when you've hit play, you can make changes. So for example, if this speed, you don't really like it and you want to make it go faster, you can set it to 10 while you're in play mode, and there we go. And you notice I'm a lot faster now, but when I hit play again, let's say I didn't like it, I can just hit play again and it will reset back to 5. It won't save my changes. So that's kind of helpful if like you want to test how something feels, you can play with the values in play mode and then just remember whichever value you liked, take it off play mode and insert that value. Or if you test something and you really don't like it, then you just hit play again because it's not going to save it while you're in play mode. Yes, the player movement script, the speed should show up under the player movement script in your inspector. You should see a little speed and then an input value you can change. We're not changing anything else on it. We can, like, you can play around with these values on your own and see what they do, especially in the rigid body, but we're just changing the speed. All right. So now that we have a player, we kind of want the camera to stick with the player, right? And I'm actually going to make this ground a little bigger just so that we have more room to move. And now what we're going to do is one of the other options we added is the script called camera follow. And we're going to add that to the camera so that the camera sticks with our player and the player can't just run away. So selecting the camera in the hierarchy or in the scene, we're gonna go into the inspector and scroll down to the bottom to add component. And then we're gonna search up camera follow, and there should be another script here we can add. And now, if you notice, there should be an add camera follow script component on the camera now in the inspector. And this one's a little different than the player movement one. This one is asking you for says none transform. If you remember, the transform is something that every game object has to have. So for example, the camera has a transform. So this thing, it's asking us, well, the speed one was asking us for a number, so it would know how fast to move the object. This script is asking us for basically, essentially a game object. It needs to know a transform to follow. So the way you can give it a transform is if you go over to the hierarchy, you should see your sphere, which or you could have named it player, but find your sphere. You can click and hold on it and drag it down to the transform. And then let go. And now it should say sphere transform. Is everyone good with that? And then hitting play. Notice the camera now follows my player. But I'm really far away still, so we can position that manually. You can grab our main camera again, select the move tool, and move it closer. And you notice this is it's helpful to have the game view here in two separate, the scene view and the game view. That way we can see kind of how the player will see from our camera. So I'm gonna move it up and then rotate it to face it a little bit. So now if we hit play again, we see our camera and it's much closer now. Any questions so far?
Jay, is there a way that you could open up 2 inspectors to see 2 objects? Because
I
I think you
believe
can
you can
open
just have
2
one at a time.
tabs, but they both look at the same thing, from what I
Yeah,
can
I think
remember.
you can just look at one. I don't think
Yeah.
there's a way to do 2 at once. So sometimes when you click the sphere or try and drag the sphere, you'll click it and it'll open up its own inspector. So just make sure you don't like double click it or something. You click and hold. So select the main camera to have the main camera's inspector, and then click and hold and drag the sphere over. That way we're still on the main camera's inspector. We didn't switch it to like the sphere's inspector. I know sometimes people have problems with that in the past, so. Any other questions?
I think we're good.
Okay, cool. Okay, so that's the basics. Now we're going to kind of go into a bit of level design. So if you remember, the prototype you made earlier was kind of a maze. We want to try and make a maze, something for the player to do. Because right now the player can move, but there's not much for them to do. So we're going to focus on, we need to make a bigger area for the player to move around in, and we need to give them kind of a maze to walk through. So the way we can do that is by using, well, more cubes and spheres. So for example, First, let's make a hole in the ground. So what we're going to do is, let's first I'm going to select the floor I have currently, and I notice the scale is all wacky. So let's change that so that it's more uniform, just so it's helpful to keep your numbers as not as these random decimals, so that it's easier to position things later on. So like, let's bring this to 12 and 12. And then let's change this x to -2. Now we should have a more uniform looking cube. So we need to make a hole in the ground for the player to navigate to drop down to the next level. So what we're going to do, we can go into this hierarchy here. There's actually a few ways you can do this. So one, we can right click it and then just duplicate the object. Or we can go to our projects tab and drag it down here. And if you drag the floor, what you just created was called a prefab. So what a prefab is kind of like, it's like a model or a template of an object that you want to keep reproducing. So for example, if you're making a game with a lot of like easy to beat, easy to kill enemies, and you want a lot of them to be in your level, you would make that enemy as a prefab, and then you could just place them wherever you want. So for example, on this prefab here, I can drag a new one into the scene or add one into the hierarchy. I just click and drag the prefab into the scene or the hierarchy. And now I will have a second one. So this one should be in the exact same position. See, the prefab will remember, it basically saves all of the settings you've set up in your inspector. So like, it remembers that I'm at position y -2. It remembers I'm at scale 12, 12. And whenever I create a new one, it will always have that same setup. So these ones are actually on top of each other right now. So I can select the move tool and drag it out. So now now I can actually see it. Now I'm going to space it a little farther apart. So for this creating this level, I'm going to teach you a trick when using the move tool. Because normally when I move it, I just get all these weird numbers in my X position, right? I get all these decimals. And I said before, that's not very good. So if you hold control while you're moving it, it will move by a set unit, which for this is like 0.25, but it's better than like being at like 0.333 or something. So I can kind of get them to snap together more. And now we have kind of an even surface. I'm going to stop for questions because I see the chat's blowing up right now. Let's see.
It's just me. How do you create the new floor again? Sorry, my roommate was talking, so I just passively listened.
Okay, so there's two ways you can do it. One is you can right click and just hit duplicate, but I dragged it down into the projects tab, and that
Oh,
created
so you just redrag it on the project?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that makes
Oh,
it
okay.
prefab.
So now I have this thing here that's prefab. And then from here, I can just create as many of those as I want. So I created this. I'm actually going to move it over more a little as well. So hold control, click, and I can drag it over a little bit.
Wait, my second floor and my original floor look nothing alike.
Oh,
Well, I think maybe that's my fault. Wait, no, I don't know. Wait, they don't look, they just don't look alike. They look like different floors.
Maybe it's something to do with your lighting.
No, they're definitely different. Like they're not even, they're like somewhat, they're not even similar, I'd argue. Okay, whatever, I guess. How do you make it like a snap?
Hold control while you're using the move tool, and it moves in a set number of units. So the one thing, Alex, with having floors overlap is sometimes you get it's mostly visual stuff that will bug out. So for example, if you got a lot of these boxes, which we might actually do for this tutorial, depending on how big you want your level to be, Unity won't know like how to layer them. And so you'll see these weird kind of lines just start flickering, but it doesn't really affect the gameplay at all. It's just a visual thing that happens every once in a while if you have a lot of overlapping. So like for the sake of what we're doing and for the sake of what a lot of times you'll do, it's fine. But if you really want to be nitpicky about it, you wouldn't have them overlap.
For sure. All right. Any other
Okay, so now-
questions?
Any other questions before we continue move on with prefabs or how we created multiple of these floors and anything at all?
Looks like we're good.
Okay, cool.
1 sec.
So now let's create we want there to be a hole, because remember in the prototype, there's kind of a hole to drop down into your second floor. So we don't want the hole to be this big. So we need a third floor that's smaller. So we could drag another one in, but this one's too big because it saved this size, remember? So we can scale it back. I don't remember what direction's which. So let's just hold control, drag the scale. That's actually gonna go all the way. So let's just type, first let's drag it out, hold control, drag it out. Now we have this third floor, but we need to shrink its size.
Wait, so holding control allowed you to make the new floor?
Holding control doesn't. I made the new floor by dragging the prefab into the hierarchy.
Oh, okay.
Holding control is just for scaling by units. Scaling and moving by units. So for example, I held control when I moved it from its position as 0, 0, 0 over to where it is now. That way it just snaps by 0.25 of a unit each time. Now let's scale it back. So let's just try 4. Oh, that works. We'll do 5. And then we need it to be half its size, so like 6. And then let's snap it to here. So now we've got a hole that the player can kind of fall through. So one thing we're going to, okay, so this is going to seem weird right now, but it will help once we start, if you guys plan on making multiple floors for your player to go through. We're going to create another floor object, so we can drag in the prefab. Now we have another one. This one, we're going to drag it down a little bit to where it's just barely beneath. And then we're going to change its scale so that it covers the entirety of the level. So you notice we've got, it only right now is underneath this one. We need it to be underneath all of them. So let's drag, is it X? Yes, it's X. So it needs to be, I think, like 26, is that right? Let's just make it 30 and 15. And now we can drag it underneath. So this floor should be completely underneath, which mine still isn't. So let's make it bigger. Oh no, it definitely is. So now we have this really large, bulky object underneath our level. I noticed the chat was going up a little bit, so I'll check it really quick just to make sure.
Yeah, it's just Emily's wasn't
Okay.
snapping, but I think it might just be that they might not be aligned before the control.
Yeah, that's probably why.
That's what I'm imagining right now. If not, then I can help you in the server, Emily.
It's probably that.
For sure. Any other questions? Nice. Sounds like we can keep going.
Okay, so the problem we're going to face later on if we start making multiple levels for the player to drop through is that the camera won't be able to see through the other floors. So for example, if we drop down to another floor, the camera will just kind of, that could mess up your visibility. So we potentially want to have some kind of trigger to let the game know that you passed the first level. So we're going to kind of implement one that will make the higher levels disappear as you progress. So this giant box on the bottom right now is just a cube. This is going to be that kind of indicator for us. So, but we don't want it to actually physically be there. We only want like the collider to be there. We want the game to know that you hit something, but we don't want you to actually stop. So what we're going to do is, you see the mesh render and the mesh filter. This tells the game that this is a cube. We don't really want that. So what we can do is we can hit these dots here and delete them. Actually, it's not the dots, but where is it? Yeah, remove component. So we hit remove component. And now we see if we still have that box selected, the only thing left is this green kind of outline of a box. So the way Unity represents, that's the collider. The way Unity represents colliders is with this kind of green box. So Unity still thinks there's something there, but there won't actually physically be something there. So for example, if I'm playing, in the game view, you can't see that green box, but actually I just hit it. Give me a second. I missed something. Let's try this. Zoom keeps getting in the way.
Why do I not see a green
So now
box?
I just fell through it. You still have a collider, Emily? Maybe I think there's an option that will make you colliders visible, so maybe it isn't visible for you.
Oh, okay.
Is that other questions? I noticed the chat was going again.
Yeah, apparently somebody's. Oh, okay, yeah, never mind.
Good.
Yeah, I think we're good. But yeah, if the green box isn't showing, it might. As long as your box collider is attached to the thing that we just made invisible, it should still be fine.
So again, if you can't see it, you can always select this. So we're going to rename this one just so we know what it is, and we'll call it. Let's just call it trigger. So now it should change over here and be called trigger. I think it's because this is a. I think the reason why I had caught a problem is because this was a prefab. That's fine.
Yeah, I have a box collider. I just don't see it, so maybe that's why.
If you can't see it, it's still there. It just, I think it's just a visual thing. So now we've named this trigger. We're going to. So when we're going to drag these 4 objects, and we're going to create something that's called a parent and child relationship.
Real quick, Jared, can you just explain how you made the trigger again?
This object?
Yes.
I'm actually going to try something quick. So I'll just make a new one. We're going to create a new cube. We could use I used the prefab the first time, but we can do it with a regular cube as well. We'll reset its component to 0, 0, 0, drag it down towards underneath the floor. And then we're just going to scale it a bunch so that it covers the entirety of the floor. So I set mine to like 30, 20, and then just drag it underneath the floor. And that should be underneath one, right? Yeah, it's underneath it. And then what I do is I take these and then I remove the meshes. So that only thing should be left is a transform and a collider. And then I can hit play and I should be able to. Yeah. And then just check. And then check is trigger, sorry. And then you can move through it and it should function. There you go. Is that everyone caught up with that? We can do it multiple ways. So now I have 2 of them. Sorry if I went too fast. But we want the player, we want the game to detect when the player moves through this part of the floor to a different level. So this is what's going to do that.
Any other questions?
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna delete this one and just use this key now.
For sure. I see the green box. Awesome.
Y'all see that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is select this 4 and we're going to drag it into the trigger. By selecting any of the 4s from the hierarchy, we can drag it onto the trigger. And now you notice that it should be kind of nested underneath our trigger. And there's this arrow, so we can click it and make it vanish and disappear. So what that means is this 4 is now a child of this trigger. So changes applied to the trigger will also be applied to this child. And the reason why this is useful in a couple of ways. So in one way, it's useful because now if you notice when I move the trigger, it moves that piece of the floor as well. They both kind of transform the same way. So for example, if I wanted to move an entire level, I could just nest them all as parents, as in a parent-child relationship, and then just move one of the objects, which is actually what I'm going to do. So I'm going to select my other 4s as well, which are these 2. And you can actually select multiple things at once by holding Control and clicking, or Shift and clicking. It's similar to how it works in other programs. So I can Control click both of them, and I've selected both, and I can click drag and nest them in the trigger. So now all of these are children of this trigger floor object, and I can move them all together. Any questions with that?
Yeah, we have a question about why some of them are blue and some of them are like white gray in the hierarchy.
So the
And
blue
yeah.
ones are, oh, sorry, what was the part of the question, Christian?
No, I was just gonna explain a little bit of it and then
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, I was just gonna
So
say it's because they're part of a prefab, but you can keep,
Mhm.
yeah, you explain it better.
So they come from a prefab. If you can you just drag out a floor real quick from the assets folder? Yeah, so you can see that when we drag something out from a like as a prefab in our assets onto the hierarchy, it's blue. And then if you can click on click under it, Jarrett, click into the floor arrow to expand it. On the right
This
side.
one you mean?
Yeah, we can see how it's like it's this already prepackaged like prefab that we can't really change the elements of. And so yeah, that's the main difference between the blue objects and the white objects. You don't need to worry too much about it, but yeah, just know that blue indicates prefab. Oh, and also to explain this screen, when you're in this screen, you're kind of editing like the prefab itself, I believe. And so like if you ever need to like re-edit your prefab, you can do this and then save it by dragging it back into the assets folder. But yeah, that's it. So yeah, you can just delete that.
I'm just gonna use this one.
Okay. Sounds good.
So now we can drag this one down a ways, pull it over, and this can be our level 2. So now if you notice, we can press play. And I'm gonna make a change to the camera. You don't have to do this, but for example, in the prototype one I had, I thought it'd be a better idea if the camera was facing directly over the player for the maze. So I'm going to make that change right now. I'm gonna rotate this X to 90, and now we should be looking directly down, and we'll just pull it until it's here. If you want to be more specific with your alignment, you can. I'm just gonna eyeball it. Like if you want the ball to be actually in the center, if you do this, you can give them the same like court positions. Now when we hit play, we kind of control, we can see the top down, we see the view, and we can drop down into the next level. But nothing still is happening. So for example, you're getting this weird shadow when you drop down to the next levels. That's because these ones are still available. So what we're going to do is on this trigger, there was one other, remember when we download the script package, there were 4 scripts. We're going to use the third one called level collision. So if you select your trigger again, you can select add component and search up level collision. But pressing on that, you don't have to add anything to this one. This one is just a script and it should behave on its own. Now pressing play, it should, oh, it's because it's a little trigger. Oh, I know why. Uncheck is trigger. Now it should vanish. It's kind of, I do realize I did that really weird, but if there's any questions, so your trigger shouldn't be, your box collider on the trigger shouldn't have is trigger checked anymore. It shouldn't have it checked. It's just a weird way I did it earlier. But when you press play now and you touch it, the game should register that you collided with the collider, and then it will turn off. It turns off the trigger object. And by turning off the trigger object, because these floors are also children of the trigger object, it also turns them off.
Wait, how do you know whether or not you successfully did the collider thing? Like, how do we know
The
the trigger
shadow
turns
should
off?
disappear.
The shadow?
The shadow should disappear if the object gets turned off, and then in your
Mhm.
scene view, you should also be able to
Oh,
see
so
how it kind of
I should
pops
make a
out.
cube underneath
Mhm.
my like.
Yeah. So our
Just to
idea right
finish this
now
one.
is we have the top level, and then we're gonna have a bottom level. And so once you drop from the top level to the bottom level, the top level should just disappear, so that it doesn't obstruct the camera or the lighting at all. And then you can see the concept in Jarrett's scene view. Any other questions
so far? If not, I'm actually going to rename this to level 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's, I'm actually going to duplicate it for level 2. So if we duplicate the parent, we now have another level 1 that looks exactly the same. We call this one level 2. And I'm going to get rid of this first floor because we don't need it. We're going to use this level 2 as the level 2. Just drag that down. Maybe move it over a little bit. So now, just to practice, so you guys can practice kind of level design and movement, we're going to kind of add some walls too. Because right now our maze isn't much of a maze. You can kind of just run straight to the finish and be done. So let's add some walls to kind of create this into more of a level. I'm gonna, let's see. So let's right click and create a cube. And before we let's reset it back to 0, 0, 0. Drag it into, be the child of this parent, or be the child of the trigger, level 1. Does everyone see that? Make sure before you add it, you reset its component down to 0, 0, 0. Because one thing to note about parent-child relationships that gets a little confusing is, actually, let's redo this just so you guys can see and explain it better. You notice right now how this cube has a position 0, 0, 0, but when I drag it in to be a child, it now has position 0.275, 3.25. That's because its position is no longer being calculated according to the global coordinate system. It's being calculated according to the local system, which is based off of its parent. So this parent is offset from 0, 0, 0. And so because this cube is offset from the parent center, its now position is at 0.275, 3.25, even though globally it's at 0, 0, 0. So that's why a lot of times it's really helpful before you turn something into a child to reset it to 0, 0, 0, and then make it a child. Otherwise, you get some really, it will start to mess with your code and you get some really wonky results when you turn something into a child and it's way off in the distance or something about that.
Hello, Jay. You there?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Any questions about what we just did or something before?
Yeah, I'm just gonna explain something that was in the chat earlier. And can you click on level 1 for me, Jarrett?
Yeah.
Yeah, so somebody was curious if the script level collision would apply to the children of level 1 because we dragged the script onto the parent. And the way it works is that the script actually only applies to the actual object that it's attached to. But the way we made the level collision script is that it changes a certain property in like whatever object that it's attached to. So in this case, it would be level 1 that it's attached to, and it changes the is active Boolean. And so like if you look at the name level 1 under inspector, there's a little check mark under it. Can you just click that real quick? Yeah, so that basically renders it active or inactive depending on if there's a check mark or not. And that you can see how if we make level 1 inactive, it also makes all the children inactive as well. So the level collision script is actually changing that check mark from true to false. And so that's why the parents also get modified. Yeah, so it's not really the script like also attaching to the children. It's just that the script changes the parents, which by definition of the parent-child relationship also changes the child.
Yeah, apologies if I explained that poorly.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Okay, and then I think we're good to keep going.
Cool. Oh yes, we're making walls to this level. So this is going to be one of our walls. We can rename it to wall. And first let's shrink it down. So let's take its scale. And and we'll pull it in. This is its X, so let's just. One other thing to notice if you don't want to do it manually is that you can click like the little X here and then move your mouse either way or the other and it will move as well. But that's too much, so let's just do it like this. Now it's thinner, and then we could do the scale it out more. Maybe make it taller. And now we have kind of a good sized wall. So let's move that into position. And then just you guys can use control and it will go by units. So if everything is unit set up, they should kind of snap together like that. Now you should have one wall and you guys can go ahead and I'm just gonna add a few more, but you guys can go ahead and add more walls for the entire level as well if you want.
So yeah, just design the level however you guys want it. Make it so that you have to go through like a small little maze to get towards the hole. And we'll give you guys a little bit to do that, right, Jared? I think.
We'll give you a few minutes. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask now, or if not, I'm going to add a few walls. We'll give you some time to add some, and then we'll come back together and we'll finish off with the last few things.
Yes, sir. Sounds good to me.
Wait, how many walls should we make? And we just put them anywhere?
Up to you.
Yep, it's up to you. This is just to get you guys comfortable with how to use the scene interface and the hierarchy. So
yeah, Sydney asked, is my wall supposed to be making a shadow? And generally, yes, I'd say. Just because the existence of a directional light. Can you click on type right there, Jarrett? Under light, the light component.
Oh yes, directionals.
Yeah, so you see how like there's different types? The one that we have default right now is a directional light. And if you zoom into like the sun object, it just shows like a couple little arrows. I think if you like click on, yeah, you can see like there's a couple little arrows and that shows the directional light. So yeah, because it's a ray that we're casting, there's going to be shadows depending on the position of the wall. If we want to turn that off, I believe we can make that light into ambient, which probably is like area, I'm guessing, for 3D. But yeah, like they're supposed to be making shadows since Unity has like just a bunch of built-in physics and ray tracing stuff, ray casting, I should say. How do you make level 1 disappear again? So if you look at the inspector tab, whenever you click on an object, there's a little check mark next to the name. And so if you click that on and off, it makes it active or inactive. If that's what you meant, that's how you do it. But also there's a level collision script, which when you collide with that little invisible green wire box, it'll make it disappear automatically. Yeah. We can go into like a little bit of how exactly these scripts are doing things, but in general, we're just saving that for the next tutorial to get you guys started with learning how to like code in C# for Unity specifically. Any other questions? Master level designer at work right now. Learn from the best. My children boxes have plus marks. Is there a good reason why? Have plus marks. Do you know what that means, Jared? Oh, I think that might be the pre. I think it's because. Wait, let me just double check. 1 second. Let's see. Huh. Is it one of the blue? Is it a blue object, Alex, or no? I might need to see screen to figure out. I can take a look at that in a sec. Peter's, yeah, could you send a screenshot in general? Also, Peter says I can't move my floor above the trigger. Are you trying to? You should be able to scale either the trigger or the floor in terms of the transfer or the position. If that doesn't work, let me know. That's strange. Yeah, Peter, can you also send a screenshot with that if you're having a little trouble? I'll hop into the Discord right now if any of you guys want to talk, by the way.
My level looks jank as fuck.
That's okay. I mean, we're not. We don't have to be perfect. Yeah, I didn't scale these very well, so like there's little overhangs.
Is there a way to just have the objects click with each other no matter their position?
So there's a way to do.
It might have just been the bottom of
It's
this.
called like mesh clipping or something. It's really
might have just been
janky
the
though, and
bottom.
so a lot of times just
Oh,
don't
okay.
use it. Just rely on.
It's like the reason my level looks so jank is because I haven't been using control at all. So it just looks wrong. I'll say that.
It's called like vector.
Oh, okay. So I figured out why they were showing the plus marks, Alex, by the way. It's because you see how you made the level into a prefab, and then I'm guessing you added like cube one after it. That's because like those objects with the plus signs aren't attached to your prefab, I believe. So like if you were to drag out another prefab of the same type, they wouldn't have those objects with a plus marker. So it's just kind of an indicator that you have an object under a prefab that isn't part of the prefab itself. That's not necessarily like a bad thing, because sometimes you want to like drag out a prefab and then add different components depending on if you need it to do something more specific. But yeah, I think that should be why, from what I can remember at least. You created the cubes of the 3D thing? That's strange then.
So Mila asked, "Is there a way to get the level 1 to start at a weird? It starts at a weird number. How do you get to start at 0, 0?" I think that's just because that's where the object is placed. So like the reason why mine, have you noticed like my level 1 is at like -8.25, -3.25? The reason why that's the case is because this player object is at 0, 0. So you could position your level to be at 0, 0, like the overall thing. You would just need to move the player around and reposition the camera and stuff as well. Because like if I did that, the player would be in the floor. So I just, instead of moving, I did the player first, I just kept the player at 0, 0 and just moved it down a little bit and built from there. Does that help? Right, so I'm gonna add something real quick just to say, so if you notice this might, you might consider this a problem, or it kind of is, but all of our walls and floors are all white. So they kind of blend in together. Like if you look at my game view, it's hard to tell where this wall ends and the other one begins. The only way we can do that is through the shadows, really. So a way to help with that is we can create something called materials. And that's what these were. Someone mentioned them earlier in my projects tab. So materials you create, because materials are considered assets. They aren't game objects, so you don't create them in the hierarchy. Instead, you come down here to asset. We can right click inside projects, the project tab, click create, and then find material. And then this should pop up. So we don't have to worry about most of these, since all we really want to do is change the color. So you want to look for a setting called albedo and click on that white box. And then you can change that color. So let's do red just for the heck of it. And now we have this red color. And the way to apply these is by you click and hold and you can drag it on. And then you can see, notice that whatever I want can take that color. So let's just make the player red. And then these are the ones I previously had made. So for example, I made this green colors for the goal so that you knew like that's where you need to go and you win. And then I also made this gray for the floor just so it's a little darker than the wall. Now if you hit play, things are a different color and they kind of stand out a little more. So that's good basics to materials as well. So if you wanted to add different colors to your levels, that's how you would do it. You can also add materials by dragging and then placing it in the hierarchy, I'm pretty sure. And the inspectors will, I think. But an easy way to do it is just drag onto whatever's in the scene. Any other questions, or you guys want to keep level designing? Go ahead and continue. Any other questions? Yeah, so albedo is on, when you have the material selected in your projects tab, it should appear in the inspector and it's the one near the top. So the way to create the material, again, is from in the projects tab, you can right click and find create at the top and then find material here. I think you can do it here as well. You can also do it from the top in the assets tab. You can hit create and click material, and that will also create a new material. Oh, so the people were talking about how everything is that beige color? Because that's, I think, is a lighting thing. And we can go over that for now if you guys want. So like, for example, there's a good way to do this. So if a lot of ways to check, a lot of times the first thing you open up will be white, but when you start adding more scenes, they'll be like this darker, like beige color. And that comes from the lighting setting. It's trying to save your performance. So like if you're making big games, maybe you want to check it off, but for now, since if this is a small one, you can select the window. And if you scroll down to, I gotta remember, in rendering, find lighting settings. Does everyone see that window, rendering to lighting settings? And if you click that, we open up, this window should appear. Does everyone see that window? Okay, and now if I remember correctly, you want to, you just check auto generate and then turn off baked global. Have these two be unchecked and turn on auto generate. And that should auto generate the lighting. Let me know if that fix works for you all.
It worked for me.
So Milo's having an issue with default material. So when you drag it onto an object, it should change the material down here to like whatever it's titled. So mine just titled new material. On the other hand, this is called default material. You could try, I think you can add like this, right? Maybe not. Okay, let's try. Which wall is that? This wall. You can try dragging onto something in the hierarchy and see if that changes it.
For some
walls
reason, my
aren't
green
disappearing
material
when I-
won't. My green material won't apply to one of the walls. Can I just drag it on? Even if I drag it onto the correct cube, it doesn't turn green. Everything else is turning green except this one wall.
That's weird. Maybe I'm not sure.
Hmm.
I have to look at it.
Hello, I'm back from answering some other questions. I can answer some questions in chat.
For those,
How do you
can
get?
help Emily with her thing? Because I wasn't sure. The lighting tab is up here. You click on window, go down to rendering and lighting settings, and that should open up the lighting tab.
For some reason, one of my walls won't turn green if I drag my green material over it. Like literally everything else turns green except this one wall.
Can you screen share in breakout 1 for tutorials?
Alexander said the walls aren't disappearing for me when I hit the level trigger. So
Are they childed?
Yeah, are the walls part of your parent trigger?
Wait, it has to be. Wait. No. Should they be in the parent?
Anything you want to do, everything that's part of level 1 should be part of that parent trigger. That way they all disappear when you pass through. with little weird pluses. Did you figure out what that was, Christian, or did he leave? Let me, well, I think we may have to wait to see what Christian is because I can't see your screen. So did the person who needed the lighting tab, they've found the correct settings, correct? Made the level trigger thingy a prefab. It shouldn't, as long as you make the correct changes to it. So you depend. Oh, my internet's going out.
Yeah, so were you talking about the prefab of a level trigger?
Yeah.
Yeah, it shouldn't be too bad that you did it. We don't necessarily need to make a prefab, but it won't a prefab and its original like game object will always like perform the same as long as you didn't change any components of it. Isn't the plus because it's an override of the object? If you mean like the plus next to like the little cube symbol of a game object, then yeah, I believe that it's because like you're changing something. Oh wait, of the parent object. Usually the pluses are related to the prefab. Because if you change something about a prefab, like adding a child to it, then it'll make the child have the little cube symbol as well as a plus marker next to it. If that's not what you're mentioning, then I can try to see if you screenshot it in chat. Graphic
Also,
design in my oh my gosh, that level looks pretty.
Also, we did. This is a short meeting just because it's an intro one meant to get you guys comfortable with it. So the rest of the time can just be spent on questions and you design the level. The only other thing I had left was just a really simple timer you could add to the UI. So if there's anybody who's into
For
that,
sure.
maybe in a few minutes we can add that. But feel free to like ask whatever questions you want, because most of the general teaching is basically over. It's just level design at this point.
Yeah, also after you do the UI thing, I can chip in a little bit about like the scripts and how they work. I won't go too in depth because that's probably more for next week kind of thing, but I just want to do it so that like people get the idea of how scripts change game objects, like so that it's not like a black box of magic. But yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Oops, we were
Cool.
losing you a
We
little
could.
bit.
I can do the UI thing real quick for those
Yeah,
watching. If
that sounds good.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
Okay, I'm good. All right, so we can just do the UI thing, just really quick then, if everyone's ready. So the way kind of UI works is you put what's called a canvas over the screen. So it's a game object. So if we go into the hierarchy, we can right click, and instead of going to like 3D object, we go down to UI. And from UI, you'll see there's a canvas. So we want to create one of those. And once you create the canvas, it should auto create an event system with that. We're not really going to use the event system or anything, but that always kind of gets partnered with the canvas. And now if you notice the canvas, the canvases are always really giant. So like if you look in my scene view, there's this giant like invisible box. That's the UI. So the elements will be kind of placed here.
Yeah. Don't worry about
So
how big it is relative to your game.
yeah.
It'll like scale properly to your screen, but yeah, it's really weird that they do this, I think.
Yeah.
It just makes it ginormous.
So
Okay, yeah.
for the
Continue.
timer, all we're going to need is a text object. So if you right click the canvas and then go back down the UI and select text, it should automatically create a text as a child of the canvas. Or you can create a text separately and drag it to be a child, but just make sure the text is a child of the canvas. Next, we're going to select the canvas and add the script to that. So the script is called countdown timer, which I actually changed it to count up instead of down, but we can change that if you want. So it's not really a countdown timer anymore. So we can search up, selecting a canvas, we can search up countdown timer. And now the script should be here. So like I said, I actually changed it to count up because I wanted to like see how long it would take to clear each level to be more of that kind of timer than counting down. But if you want to change it, we can go over how to change that in the script. It's really simple. Other than that, this time left is just a variable it's going to take that either counts down or counts up from. So you can decide that, like if you're counting down, you want to give the player 30 seconds, you just change it to 30. But like I said, right now it's counting up. So I just set it to 0. And then you also notice that it needs something called a countdown. It says none text. So that's where that text object comes from. So in the hierarchy, we're going to grab the text object that's the child of the canvas and drag it into that spot. Remember, this script is on the canvas object, not on the text object. So the countdown timer script that's on the canvas should now have the text object. And if we do that, we can go ahead and hit play. And notice in my game view, there's now this little 1 that's just following my screen always in the center that's counting up to tell me how long I've taken to like pass the level. So it just took me 11 seconds to pass that level. We can go ahead and there's ways to like reposition it relative, but just for this, to keep it simple, we're just going to do it manually. So one thing I didn't know to mention earlier that's kind of important is it's really easy to lose objects in Unity. Like once you start adding a lot of things to a scene, it's really easy to lose place of where they are. So if you select them in the hierarchy, put your mouse over the scene view, then press F, the camera will jump to the location of that object. That way you can't lose anything. Everyone catch that? So I can do it to the player as well. I can select the player, like I'm way out here in space. There's no player in sight, but I can select the player, select the player in the hierarchy, hover in the scene view and press F, and now I'm zoomed in on the player. So going back to the text object, we can kind of just position it up in the box so that it's in the corner of the screen. If you notice, as I move this, it's also changing in the game view. For example, you see it on my game view down below. So let's just drag it to the top left corner and press play. And now we have a timer that's in the top left corner. It's kind of small, but I don't think you're not really supposed. I don't think you're supposed to scale text UI like this, but I'm just gonna do it since why not?
How dare you?
So now it's bigger and it should kind of look really pixelated. Yeah, it looks really pixelated, but it's now a bigger timer in the top left corner of my screen.
Yeah. Oh, also, Jared, do you
So
want
that's
to just,
kind of,
oh, sorry.
yeah, what was it?
Can you just talk about like the free aspect and also like maximize on play and some other like attributes of the game tab? Can you just show them off real quick? Yeah, because like right now, since we're working with Canvas, I just want to mention like how it works with the different resolutions.
The aspects changes the resolution right in the game view.
Yeah.
It
So
also changes the canvas. Oh yeah, since I position it manually, it's gonna be weird.
yeah. So like keep in mind like we're not gonna go too in depth with text elements just yet, but the game view has a little drop down menu that shows like what kind of resolution that we can play the game in. And yeah, so like Jared's showing it off right now. Free aspect kind of just like shows whatever your game tab is. And then that'll kind of like, I think that pretty much scales what the canvas is in your scene view. But like for certain games, if we like have an options menu or something, like we'll need like the UI to be scaled along with however the canvas is based on resolution. And we'll show you how to do that later. I just wanted to keep it in mind. Also, like if you click maximize on plays so that's lighter than the others, it makes it so that whenever you click the play button, it kind of like takes everything out and you full screen. This is useful for more for like playtesting if you need to, but like in general, you want to see like the inspector tab to see if like values are changing properly and all. But yeah, that's like a good way to like show off a finished game. What do you press to zoom in on stuff in the hierarchy? I believe it's F, right, Jared?
Yeah, it's F. So you select in the hierarchy, and then as long as your mouse is hovering the scene view, you can press F and you'll zoom in on the object.
For sure. All right. Any other questions? All right. For sure, for sure.
You want to talk about the scripts then, Christian?
Yeah, I'm gonna need a palette around the scripts real quick, since I don't have like the project ready to screen share. I've mostly been following along. But if you I mostly want to talk about the player, yeah, the player movement. And so uh all of these like yeah, all of these little
Can you
scripts
still
that
see it,
have
by the way?
a hashtag like on it is represents that it's a C# file. And C# files we usually edit in Visual Studio. And this is an external editor that Jared's showing. It's not related to Unity at all, but it is integrated with Unity if you like install things properly. So like this like player movement, the public class player movement shows that it's the script called player movement, and it's extending from this thing called mono behavior, which is basically Unity's class that like has like a bunch of like default components within them. And so you remember how we couldn't move the player at all because we didn't have a rigid body? That's because that line with that last line on 18 has like a little add force function. You can see that it does this.get component. And yeah, the word component is really important if you want to like tab back into Unity. Yeah, so whenever we click on an object, we can see in the inspector how it has several different components. Each different dropdown is a component on its own. So like rigid body is a component, player movement's a component, and stuff like that. And so what we're doing in the player movement script is we're getting one of the components from the game object that it's attached to and adding velocity to it, specifically to the rigid body. And that's based on our like whether or not we're posting WASD, but that's not too important. But yeah, so I just want to like quickly talk about scripts, and also for the level collision, if you could click on that within Unity. Yeah, so also keep in mind when you click on a script, you can see it. You can see the contents of the script in the inspector window as well. So that's useful if you're not like planning to edit something. But yeah, so this level collision script, remember we added to like this object that just had a wireframe of a hitbox, and we utilized that wireframe of a hitbox using a special function called onCollisionEnter. And again, I don't want to get too specific, but onCollisionEnter is actually a something that we're overriding from the mono behavior class, and that basically says whenever another collider enters this collider, then return whatever the script is attached to false. That's the this.gameObject.setActive line. And yeah, so the idea of a game object is just whatever we have on the hierarchy. Like we had like player, we had trigger, we had floor. Those are all game objects, and game objects are all these containers for components. And so that's something that like I really want to make sure that we talk about before we end. Is if you go back, Jarrett, to Unity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so everything you see in the sample scene is generally a game object, and you access that game object with scripts, the keyword game object, and then they all have components. So yeah, sometimes it's like a little confusing because like C++ or whatever you guys have learned in class generally don't work like in the same system. But yeah, that's just what I wanted to talk about real quick. And then we will get into more specifics of scripting and how to code in C# specifically with the Unity engine next tutorial, I believe. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much
So
all I
that's
have.
kind of all we have for this tutorial. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Any
pretty
other
much all we have.
questions?
Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you guys for coming also.
I can keep this meeting up till 8. So if anyone wants to hang around, like you
Do we have
guys
an
still have a lot of
attendance here,
time.
Jarrett? That's a great
I
question.
do not know.
I will
Let me
ask
look.
Athena. Yeah. If there's an we're gonna make an attendance code right now. We'll post it in announcements. Sorry for not having that ready for you quite yet, but yeah, thank you all for coming.
Oh, it's yay unity, double exclamation point.
Yes, sir. The double exclamation point is always like confusing. I'm like, is this included?
Yeah, it is. Is it just us? Is everyone gone? Oh no, Tyler's
So
here.
we still got Tyler.
Oh.
Oh my gosh, Jared, you're so much better at explaining things than me. Thank God you took this first one.
I've done this tutorial before,
This whole jargon.
basically.
Yeah, for like 3 years or something.
Basically, that's
Yeah.
right. It's like my third time doing it. Oh, shoot, what am I doing?
Okay. You have it like you had your eyes closed, just talking about it.
That's
Bro, I'm gonna be real. I didn't even know you could change the position like by clicking on like the X, Y, or Z and sliding it. I didn't even know
Oh, you
that.
didn't know that?
Because I usually just like typing things to be specific so that I can.
Yeah.
But like, it's definitely useful. Oh my god, I'm gonna be using that. But yeah, okay. I think I'm gonna hop out. I might be in the Discord for a little bit, but yeah, thank you for leading this,
Thank-
Jared. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to stop the